It is No Gifts, Please, the parenting podcast by the pair with no real gifts, but a whole lot of gumption. Hey everyone, I'm Steve Noviello.
And I'm Jenny Anchondo.
So it's raining in Dallas today, so for those of you watching on YouTube, let's just go ahead and just get that out of the way.
Don't watch on
Get
YouTube.
that out of the way. Of course, this will air like a week from now. People are like, it's not raining.
I know. It's just, we're giving Drown Rat
We are
right now.
We're giving, it's been.
I mean, not you. No.
No,
just,
you're not.
I mean,
you're not incorrect. You're not incorrect. And honestly, I feel like we have so much to catch up on, but we're also going to tape another episode today where we will do a lot of catching up.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that because I want to get right to our guest.
Because
I am so excited. Listen, as you know, Jenny and I look at this as kind of a service opportunity for the world of parenting. But at the end of the day, this is a completely self-serving, how can we have what we think is important addressed by every best expert possible, and we have one today for sure.
Oh my gosh. This has been, I think, probably the most requested topic. And that is, people want to talk about the birds and the bees with their kids, but they don't really know how, they don't know why, they don't know when. So we have Megan Michelson, who's a former middle school teacher, mother of 3, and she runs Birds and Bees, which offers simple tools for busy parents when it comes to sex education. If you are on Instagram at all and you're a parent, you probably follow them. You've probably seen their videos. They're frequently shared. They frequently go viral. They've got educational programs for parents. And I am so excited that Megan's actually here with us in studio.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, so let's just go ahead and start by kind of asking you.
We have 27 million questions.
Let's dive in.
By kind of asking you what the question is. I think that people probably come to you at a point when they're at a crossroads. What generally is that crossroads that makes them say, I got to reach out to Megan?
So I think typically parents, so our goal is to reach parents with younger kids. So our goal is to reach parents with kids ages 1 through 10. And if you typically say sex education or talking to your kids about sex, you do not think of kids ages 1 through 10.
That's
and
right.
So that's kind of the juxtaposition of our message is we want to reach these really young parents with young kids, but then parents don't think they need you until 12 or 13 when they're about to opt in for this health class at school. And they're like, oh,
okay,
who
so
do I talk to?
Not even joking. So we have a first grader. We just got something saying, hey, do you want to opt in? And I was like, ooh, wait.
You're like, let me ask Megan.
Well, I was like, well, good thing we booked Megan.
Call her in.
So I did opt in, but I was looking kind of deeper into it. And I think that for the first graders, it's more of like what's appropriate in terms of like physical touch and space and very kind of general start. Like the puberty stuff is like for the fourth graders, right?
Right.
So when you say to people, because I know our listeners are like 1, I mean, what? Maybe
what do you mean by that?
I mean, what do you mean?
Right.
What should I be starting so early?
So what we really want to do is our overall goal at Birds and Bees is to get rid of the talk. And now that we are on video, you can see my little quotation marks.
Exactly.
I'm not used to these podcasts with videos. But the talk, that one time where mom or dad came to your room at 12 or 13 and, knocked on that little door and then whoosh, they told you every single thing you never wanted to know about sex.
Can I come in?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, do you remember yours?
It's painful.
I think we had maybe more frequent talks.
Look at you.
But I think that my parents were maybe ever so slightly more modern, for their time.
Right. I mean, you cut down your own Christmas tree and made homemade jam. I feel like we were always kind of
we were just like living in our own world there.
Right.
But I definitely remember the talk at school.
Yeah.
And I definitely remember how awkward that was.
So as boys, we did not have the talk at school. What we had was a moment where all of the girls were taken to an assembly, I'm assuming to discuss things like their period.
Right.
And we did nothing. I very vividly remember, and mom and dad, I know you listen and I know you watch, sitting at the kitchen table with my parents and my mom saying, I think it's time that you and Steven, meaning me and my dad, had a talk. And my dad said, about what? And she furiously flipped through the newspaper and she held up a page that made a reference to sex. And I was like, oh my God. And then not a couple of weeks later, Frank Noviello and I are driving down Old Country Road on Long Island. This didn't happen, but in my mind, the door is locked and he turned to me and I was like, oh my God. This is it.
This is the newspaper.
This is the talk. And I couldn't tell you. I mean, well.
And how did it work for you, Steve?
I could tell you what he said, but I feel like.
That's not what we're here for.
That's what we're here for.
But I do want to hear that another day.
So I will tell you afterward.
Do instead of a talk? It sounds like it's not a talk. It's a continuum. It's
a conversation.
Correct. Thank you. So what we're trying to get rid of is the talk. And what we want you to do or trying to equip you to do is replace it with multiple age-appropriate conversations. And really, that might sound awful at first. I mean, I think some parents might be listening thinking, okay, I didn't want to talk about this once, so why would I want to talk about this a lot? This is a terrible idea. But the reality is, with big topics as parents, we never think of any big topic in your child's life, whether that's their faith or manners or safety issues. None of those are one and done.
Right? Yeah. No, right.
That's how doesn't make any sense just from a logical point of view, right?
Sure.
And so, if something as important as this, we want our kids to have a healthy understanding of sex, and so we should break that up into lots of age-appropriate conversations. So, going back to your original question of what does that mean for a 1-year-old or 2-year-old? What in the world? Now, don't think we're total freaks here. We're not saying tell your 1-year-old about sex. But what this does is breaks it down into age-appropriate conversations. What does that look like for a young child? Well, one of the biggest things we are big believers in is using the anatomically correct words for body parts. So penis, vagina.
So it's a huge
bad
shift
words
for some families. But, no, that's fine.
That's a huge shift for a lot of families. Typically you have the two types of families. The families that like to whisper the word privates.
Right.
And it's like, oh, those are bad parts, secret parts, shameful parts. And then over here, you have the families that like to use what we call wingy-wangy words and the kind of the silly willy words.
Like wingy-wangy.
Exactly.
And can you explain why that's not ideal?
Okay, so here are the two camps, right? And if you have young kids, what you two do, and I'm assuming most people listening today have young kids, you know that kids are silly about private parts.
Right.
That's age-appropriate. That's
For
normal.
sure.
I have a daughter and 2 boys. I mean, it is just, they think it's the funniest thing in the world. And it might be funny to them for a long time. I don't know. But it's our job as parents to kind of help. We don't want to encourage the silliness, and we don't want to enhance any shame. And so these are kind of the two camps that it falls into. So if we're whispering these words, but every other word in our body has accurate terms: head, shoulders, knees, and toes, earlobes, knuckles, elbows. Those are weird words, but we just, it's matter of fact. And then we kind of say, oh, in your privates. That's like kind of a secret part.
Right.
Shameful, you should be embarrassed. But you really shouldn't be embarrassed of those parts, and they're not bad parts, nor are they bad words. And then, so you don't want to be shameful and you don't want to be silly. You want to be very medical. Medical.
No, I think that should be a word too.
Matter of fact.
Medical. Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Matter of fact,
coffee.
Practical. All of the things.
Medical and matter of fact.
Okay.
Or medical if you're into combining words.
I do like that.
I do too, actually. Okay. Anyways, you want to be medical and matter of fact when you're talking about body parts, and it is what it is attitude. But ultimately, the most important reason you want to be correct with your terminology is for sexual abuse prevention.
Right.
And that's a very heavy topic, and we're not going to dive into it today. But if you hear anything, it is this: using these words in anatomically correct ways and teaching our children that those parts are private and setting clear boundaries is one of the best things we can do as parents to prevent abuse. And so what does that sound like? I think sometimes parents hear this information in like general terms and think, oh, God, that's awful. Like, what does that mean? But really, it's just little phrases. Like if your kids are in the bathtub, you're bathing your kids together. It's like, oh, stop touching your brother's penis. That's his private part. We don't ever touch somebody else's private part.
It's
Done.
even your
That's
volume that I noticed, Megan. You're saying you're not doing the whisper
Right.
part. You're saying that's his private part.
Right.
So I think that's so subtle, but it's actually really big in terms of maybe a comfort level shift for a family to just keep that same tone all the way through the sentence.
I remember being at the pediatrician with our oldest son, and the doctor was examining him. Maybe he was 5 or 6 or however old he was. And for the first time, the doctor said, now I'm going to take a look at your penis, and it's okay because I'm the doctor and your dad is here.
Exactly.
Blah, blah. And I will tell you that my first reaction, not outwardly, but inwardly, was like, oh my God, like I hate is the wrong word, but like that we're introducing you to this because we're suggesting, by suggesting that it's okay, we're also suggesting that there are people who might try this that where it's not okay.
Right.
And I don't want you to know that that's the kind of world we live in
Totally.
yet. But it was like, okay, like we're good. You know?
And that example is exactly the one we use oftentimes when introducing this idea to parents, because to your point, I think there is this idea that I don't want to take away my child's innocence.
Right.
And that is a pushback with parents of young kids, because we all have young kids. It's like you don't want them to know that there's anything bad in the world, right? But a lot of this information that we do encourage parents to share is just kind of matter of fact information. We're not going into this deep dive of what sexual abuse is. We're just saying, hey, that's your penis, that's a private part. Nobody else can touch that. Or maybe being more clear on certain words or certain conversations. What does the word private mean? Oh, well, the word private means no one can look at, no one can touch, and no one can take pictures of. So you're just kind of being black and white with this.
These are the rules. Just like snack time, this is the rule.
Exactly. And, I think the example you shared in the pediatrician's office is probably one of the first times that it's modeled for parents. If they're not following us on Birds and Bees. But the pediatricians, and they do an excellent job. And so we really encourage parents to use your pediatrician voice, because they're very matter of fact about it. And they're very clear about it and respectful about it, but they're not like, oh, sweetheart.
Right.
Oh, There's not like this emotionally heavy conversation.
Yes,
it's kind of like, it is what it is.
You also just mentioned, I know not for this purpose, but you mentioned like even bathing and whatnot. Is there an age, because we did bathe our boys together, and probably within the last year, I was like, you know what? I feel like we're getting they're getting large. The tub is getting small.
Right.
There's a little bit more horseplay than there needs to be. And like, it's time for our older son to go shower by himself. Is there a point an age at which there's like a recommendation where you kind of split up that kind of more private behavior?
Great question. So this question comes up a lot, particularly with families of mixed gender. Having two boys, obviously you're feeling that pull, but especially with families like, well, I have 2 boys and a girl, or 3 girls and a boy, whatever. So the short answer is to respect the most modest person in the home. So what that means is if it's okay with everybody, it's not a problem. Now, all these conversations are pre-puberty changes, right? So we're not encouraging like your
13-year-olds to be.
When bodies start changing, let's respectfully, encourage some privacy. But typically, kids don't show interest in privacy or start to express that until like late elementary school, early middle school, depending on ages and stages. But usually around 9 or 10. That's the first time they typically say things like, I don't really want to take a bath with my brother anymore.
Yeah.
Or I kind of want to shower by myself. And so if your kids are 7 and 5. So if they're still, they're not embarrassed.
Right.
And honestly, as a parent, if it makes your life easier.
Well, it's funny. Our older son, at one point, my parents come and visit quite a bit, and there was something very routine. She was going to bathe him or something, and he was like, "Oh, I want Daddy to do that," and it was like, "Oh, you're." Or we'll FaceTime them and he'll make sure that
he's aware.
Underwear on. He's aware that there's a female and a female that has a different body than he does. And it's not because of a conversation or hopefully anything else that's gone on in his life that I don't know about. But it was like, okay, you are expressing awareness of this. And now I feel like I need to kind of, like you were saying, accommodate that modesty.
Right. So I would say respect the most modest person. So, just now my oldest is 10 and just recently has she been wanting to bathe on her own. And the boys are still together, and it's because now, are they roughhousing? Often they are.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes parents can freak out a bit or overreact. Like if there's, touching in the bathtub or wrestling, roughhousing, whatever it is, and think that's it. We're pulling each other, we're separating, we're done with this. And again, I'm not telling you what to do in your situation, but the reality is sometimes those moments are the most teachable moments. We have a phrase we use a lot, which is frequent and frank. And when you're talking about body parts and body boundaries specifically, we want to be frequent and frank with these conversations. Again, this is not a one and done conversation. So these boys I have, we're talking about it all the time in the bathtub or when they get out and they're wrestling. Boys, stop it. You don't wrestle when you're naked. Put your underwear on. We don't touch someone else's penis. I mean, we are having these conversations all the time to set these clear boundaries.
Okay, I have a super specific question, and this one actually came up a couple times on the Cougar Mom group chat. Always coming in with the questions. Why? And my daughter's asked this as well, and it was like the first time she's truly stumped me, and I was like, you know what? I need to think about that or figure that out. She said, "Why can boys wear no shirt?" But for me, that's a private part.
Right.
When I look at them and we looks the same.
Right. So generally speaking, I think that's a personal decision in a family. If you want your daughter to be in the backyard without a shirt on, or
which we do,
is that fine? No, okay. I think that's totally fine. That's what I'm saying.
But if somebody's coming over, I do say, let's get dressed.
Exactly. And so I think there's the specifics of that, the when and where kind of stuff. I think it's a family decision. But I think for language for young kids, I like to use the phrase kind of chest versus breast. And so you can say, you have a chest right now, so does your little brother. But when you grow up, your chest will become breast. And that is a private part. And so it's just good practice for us to be covering that up when we're around other people.
And then she'll say, why is a breast a private part?
Yeah. And then you can kind of dive in. I mean, if you wanted to dive into breastfeeding, you could.
I mean, we're definitely there because I have a 3-month-old. So she was like, "Is that why?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "I don't have any milk." So it gets very detailed. Like, I don't have milk, and I'm like, "Well, if you ever have kids, then you probably will."
Right. And so I think you can kind of nip it in the bud, pun intended, by saying the chest and breast, and it's not a private part now, but it will become a private part eventually. So it's just it's a good practice.
And then she says, but when Steve was here the other day, you had your breasts out and you were feeding Gemma and he was sitting right next to you.
Because it's a modality for it's a vessel right now.
Right. And we don't want to sexualize everying. That's not the goal. So I think part of this conversation to the question that you originally asked goes back to modesty, ultimately. Now, obviously, there's appropriate things about good touch and bad touch and, lots of specifics. But generally speaking, with modesty, that does vary from household to household. We did a story on one of our Instagram things last summer, I think, Because our answer is kind of like, respect the most modest person in the home. And that's, siblings bathing together, but also parents. A lot of times you get the question, when do parents have to stop showering with kids or bathing with kids or, running through the house naked to grab their shirt downstairs or whatever. And the reality is the level of modesty will really vary from home to home. You start talking to your friends, maybe put it out there in your cougar chat and kind of just poll the audience, like who grew up seeing their parents change or seeing their parents getting out of the shower or whatever. And that's just, there's not necessarily a hard, fast rule, but again, it goes back to like who's uncomfortable.
Right.
So let's say mom and dad are really immodest people and they're happy changing or grabbing a shirt here or whatever, but their children are visibly uncomfortable all of a sudden. Maybe the 10-year-old's kind of like, oh, sorry, mom, and doesn't want to be in there. So try to be mindful of that, I think, as parents and pick up on the modesty levels and the discomfort levels.
So I want to shift to parental response about body discovery, especially at a young age. So our youngest son is 5, right? So he'll be in the bathtub. There's water running. Yes. There is pressure on the water. He'll kind of sit on it or sit near it. It'll be splashing right on his penis. And he'll be like, Daddy, look, my penis is standing up, And I'm like, I'm like, sure is.
Yeah,
like, what? Is. Like, I mean, I don't feel like I need to have a conversation with him about whatever. But again, I'm just kind of matter of fact. And I don't know that I blow him off because he really doesn't have any follow-up questions. But it's like, yep.
Yeah. And I think honestly,
let's wash your hair.
Yeah. I think in that situation, that's fine. Redirecting is great. Distracting is great. Self-discovery, I think what the buzzword is masturbation, right? That's when parents are freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, my child's touching his private parts. Like, what? My child's masturbating. And that is just like freaks parents out because they're thinking there's a young, innocent child. And all of a sudden there's this like crazy sexualized behavior. What is happening? But it is our most frequently asked question for a reason because it happens a lot for kids. And to your point, Steve, you said the words perfectly. It's just self-discovery. Just like they're figuring out, oh, when mommy scratches my back, it feels good. Oh, the water there might feel good. Or touching right here might feel good. And they're just discovering this. They are not going down this path of like sexual discovery, So Hillary Lewis is a local pediatrician around here. And we had a podcast a long time ago that was very hard to pull off. So I'm very proud of y'all for sticking with it.
It is hard to keep going, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I think we have like 5 episodes and we're like, that's a wrap. Like, we can't, I cannot do this. Instagram is great. You can like pop on when you want to. And like, anyways, so if you're interested, tune in. We have 5 episodes and you're going to be like, oh, wow, is this the right one? Because it stopped in 2021. And yeah, that's right. But what's out there is good. And we have this like hour-plus conversation with Hillary Lewis about body exploration. What is normal? What's not normal? And like, how do we speak into that? And so your situation in the bathtub, I think you handled that perfectly. Oh, yep, there it is. Okay, let's move along. Did you get your feet clean? Did we, move right along? That's totally fine. Hands and pants is typically what we call the main question we get is like when the child's watching TV and they have their hands on their pants. Or their child's, it's like soothing techniques, basically. And so Hillary calls it body exploration because it's not masturbation. That has such a heavy connotation to it. And so the question parents really ultimately want to know, get to the bottom of, is like, well, how can I speak into this without creating shame?
Right.
Because that's the bottom line, right? You don't really want their hands in their pants when you're walking around town, but you also don't want to create shame and create all these issues for your child, right? That's the balance. So we encourage you as parents to speak into this. Tone of voice is key, what we talked about earlier. In all of these conversations, you want to have a very calm tone of voice, right? Your shock leads to their shame. So,
ooh, I like that.
Wow. Okay.
So whatever they're
just
doing,
play it cool.
Just be cool. I mean, fake it till you make it, right? Like, just like what you were saying, like, oh, it's freaking on the inside.
That's what we've literally been doing.
I mean, that's life. That's parenting.
Also the secret to our podcast.
Yes, exactly.
Honestly, I think that's like how you just get things done in life.
Sure.
It's just fake it till you make it, right? And so kids need that calming effect. So your perfect instinct kicked in the doctor's office. That comment the doctor made you uncomfortable, kind of like, oh gosh, I don't want him to know these things. But like, you didn't intervene or say, are you sure? You kind of followed that lead. And so back to the hands in the pants, our shock leads to their shame. And so what happens, just to play out the scenario, if your son or daughter has their hand in their pants watching TV and you're in the kitchen, you glance over, say, oh God, stop. Oh, get your hands out of your pants.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
That makes them feel bad.
Whoa, they have no clue what's happening.
Right.
It is just self-discovery. Like, well, my goodness, that felt good when you scratched my arm. I mean, it's just the same idea for a 5-year-old, right? We are kind of hypersexualizing them when they're not. And so tone of voice is key. And then you can set boundaries with this behavior that don't create shame. So we recommend boundaries that include habits, hygiene, and manners. And so you can use that same tone of voice. Again, in the bathtub, you kind of just redirect it and distract it. Those are great options. But, oh, sweetheart, get your hands out of your pants. We want to keep our hands really clean. Their potty, that's where we just went with potty. Let's go wash your hands. Or some people think, well, I don't like that because I don't want them to think the penis or vagina are bad parts or dirty parts, which I don't want to either. So if that bothers you, flip the script. It's like, oh, sweetheart, let's get our hands out of our pants. Our vagina is very delicate and our hands are full of germs.
Right.
Can you come over here and help me sort
So
these
the hand
Legos?
is the dirty part.
Yeah.
Okay, so because I feel like we have so much to get to.
Yes, move on.
So moving on to kind of now we've kind of, so it's totally normal for us to be discussing things like your penis or your
we
vagina.
talk about this all the time.
So now we're kind of getting into the thicker part of it. I mean, I was talking to friends of ours, and I mention them quite often on our podcast. It's another 2-dad family, and they were talking about they had the talk with their boys who are maybe one, I think might be 10 at this point or however old they are. And I was like, oh my God, it seems so young. And he's like, I know it does, but it's coming up already at school. Right. So we want to make sure that they, so is it younger than people expect that it's going to be?
I would think so. So we really hate to put an age on this. Parents, especially like proactive parents in this day
I know
and age,
we want to have like a formula,
totally.
But you're saying like key into our own experience.
Yeah. So I mean, to kind of echo what you just said, is like what you don't want to do is think, okay, well, it's age 11, 2 months, 1 day. Well, everyone listening right now would get their Apple phones out and put in the calculator and set the alarm,
lock their child in the car and go for a drive.
Totally. But something we talk about a lot on our course is this reality that ages are so different, right? Like Steve, your oldest is 7.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, think about. And your little one's 5?
Yes.
Okay, well, think about when your oldest was 5. In his sweet little life, he lived in a 5-year-old world. Nothing went beyond age 5. He probably went to the Arboretum and went to the museums a lot and had 5-year-old TV shows and ate 3 healthy meals a day with organic snacks and just lived this.
No, he didn't live with Jenny. He lived with me. My husband and I raised him.
Okay,
well,
so some
the point
Cheetos.
is, so maybe some Cheetos here and there. The point is, his life was probably very different than your youngest at 5. Right? So to give a number is just misleading because my oldest is 10 and my youngest is 5. And when my oldest went to kindergarten, it was just, we were a totally different family. Because we were all a 5-year-old family. Well, now when my baby goes to kindergarten, we're a 10-year-old family.
Right.
The things he's listening to, the stories we're telling around the dinner table, I mean, the stories he hears, the words he hears, the activities we do, the amount of times he takes a bath, like everything's changed.
So are we waiting to pick up on their cue when they bring it up, or is it something that we bring up from time to time? What's sort of the initiation there when it comes to actually sex, not just body parts?
So it'll vary from child to child. So the point of that whole story with the ages is instead of focusing on when, we want you to focus on who. And who has the first impression and who has that, the kind of who gets the power of the first impression to tell your child about this. And so back to when to explain sex. So way backing it up from a very young age, you can start laying the foundation for these conversations by introducing concepts like seeds and eggs. Seeds make new life, eggs make new life, and kind of this reproduction in all living things conversations. And then as it gets, as they kind of get older and older, you build on that conversation.
Like where the eggs come from and where the seeds come from.
Or like a female has an egg, a male has a seed. The seed and the egg make the baby. These conversations are slowly building. So you don't have to like jump into the whole penis, vagina, textbook sex ed till later. But that doesn't, you're having building block conversations till you get there. If that makes sense.
It's interesting what you're saying right now. I think kind of brings up the conversation about birth. I saw that you were posting about that on the Instagram, and I'll never forget. My daughter's always wanted to be a mom. She's like, I want to have 5 kids, 10 kids, so many kids. And then in kindergarten, boy said, in order to have kids, you have to have your stomach sliced open. And so she was like, I'm done. I'm not going to be a mom anymore.
Forget that.
Turns out, so then it started that whole conversation.
Right.
When it comes to that, are we just like families are having the conversation if a sibling comes along or if they ask or?
Yeah, I think so. The goal is to be proactive, right? First of all, no one will be perfect. Everyone's going to mess up these conversations. So just plan on that.
Okay.
So if you say, oh man, I shouldn't have said that, circle back, go back, try again. Hey, you asked me a really good question in the car today and I got kind of frazzled. I'm going to start over. So nailing these questions is out of the question. We're not going to do that, right? We're all going to mess up or get nervous or whatever. So just go back to them, So we're going to be proactive parents. We're looking for opportunities to move towards them with this information. Like, oh, your teacher's pregnant. Have you ever wondered how that baby's going to get out of there? Look for opportunities to move towards them with this information. And then again, kind of just like laying this foundation where initially you just want to kind of introduce the characters in these stories, right? Seed and egg make a baby. Well, lots of other stories have different characters, like birth mom for an adoptive family, know? So just kind of you're laying the foundation for all these things to come together for their own personal story.
It's funny. Because of course I'm sitting here being like, okay, well, do I also have to I mean, we had kids via IVF,
Right.
and a surrogate and who they know, but we have a book called And Tango Makes Three, and it's all about these two gay penguins, and they got an egg. We often tell them, or I often tell them as their bedtime story, the story of them and how daddies really wanted to have babies and daddies can't have babies by themselves. So we had to find somebody to put a baby in her belly, that kind of stuff. But I hear a lot from you about just the discussion of sex around the purpose of reproduction. There's also the other half of that, which is the sex around the purposes of enjoyment.
Right.
And so
the pleasure aspect does not come in until like post-puberty.
Okay.
So what we focus on.
Okay, no, go ahead, yeah.
So what we're focusing on at Birds and Bees is everything really up till that. Now, obviously, we are not encouraging you to have conversations with your prepubescent children about the dangers or pleasures associated with sex. We are pretty much introducing this at face value, because the reality is that's what they're developmentally ready for. If you do explain to them the basics, the mechanics of sex, typically their answer is like, gross.
Yeah.
Ugh. And it's like, oh, I totally get that.
Sure.
It's not for kids. So they are not ready to hear the dangers of it or the pleasures of it. And so what we're trying to do is build this foundation of basic facts. And to your point, everyone's story is different. Gone are the days of like, this plus this equals this, right? I mean, I guess technically seed, egg makes baby. That's the same. But the story around it is different for so many people, through IVF, through adoption, through surrogacy. There's so many different ways now that we kind of say, introduce the characters and then tell your story. Because to your point, kids love to hear their stories. Just like the story of birth we were talking about. Like, kids love to hear that, and so kind of challenge yourself a little bit, like, okay, I'm going to say the word uterus, or okay, wow, I think I'm going to say, birth canal, or whatever exciting word you want to add. Because the point is, not only are we giving them accurate information, which is important, but we're essentially establishing this pattern of trust and communication between parent and child. And that happens little by little over the years. We kind of have this message of the drip, drip, drip strategy, where that's so much more powerful for kids to take in this information little by little, drip by drip, with you, mom and dad, being the loving authority and pouring into them, because they're going to hear a lot of other things out there that are probably going to be confusing or not make sense to them. And so you want to be that voice. You want to have that.
It's funny. We a little off topic here. We had a friend of our son had come over to the house for a play date. I think they were in kindergarten still, and they were sitting around the table having ice cream. And there is a large photo frame, and we had some wedding pictures in it of my husband and I when we got married. And all the kids know Jacob has two dads. It's very, very commonplace, right? From day one, Jacob has two. Oh, you were one of Jacob's dads. And he was sitting there and he looked up and he goes, Mr. Novello, who's that in that picture with you? And I said, oh, that's Jacob. That's my husband. And he said, wait, you don't have a wife? And I said, no. I said, I have a husband. He said, but why are you kissing him? And I said, well, he goes, I didn't think boys were supposed to kiss each other like that. And I said, well, they can when they're married. And he said, oh, okay. Then kind of, but my immediate thought was like, oh shit, I got to call this this is going to come up at dinner.
Right.
Like, how do I get in front of this?
The Birds and Bees
because like
course.
Is the conversation at dinner. So Jacob's dad was showing me pictures of him and his husband kissing when I was at their house. And, so she came over and I know her much better now, and I know she's listening. And I was like, hey, heads up, like I've had 45 years of runway here. You're going to have about 25 minutes in the car. Here's what, and she was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I was like, no, I love that he asked. And I said, but I just need you to know because it's going to come up and I want to give you as much time.
Totally.
As
Which is
there,
so great. And you handled that so perfectly. And that's like kind of what we say a lot of times, every family looks different. I mean, I don't have to tell you all that, but like your family has two dads.
Right.
So-and-so's family doesn't have a dad. So-and-so's family has a grandmother raising them. So-and-so has a stepdad and a stepmom. Like every family looks different.
Well, and what it pointed out that I failed to realize is that while all of the kids are very comfortable with the concept that our children have two dads, it never dawned on
the
him
intimacy
that we were intimately
exactly.
We were in a relationship. Also, he just thought he just happened to have two.
Yeah,
maybe there are a couple of moms.
It's like a bonus.
I don't know.
But and I think that's helpful for all of these conversations. They seem daunting, but just a reminder: like our kids aren't they're not associating things like that. They're not thinking this emotional and pleasure-driven conversations. Like they're not developmentally ready for those conversations, and they're not connecting any dots.
Right.
No,
it just kind of is what it is.
For the people that have older children, let's say these are parents who grew up in really the talk generation, or perhaps the really religious generation where sex is only for having children, only for making babies, and anything outside of that is really sinful. What do you say to that parent who's trying to kind of come around to modern times, trying to like set their children up in the right way, what advice can you give to them?
So the topic of sex is such a personal topic, right? And so we really encourage parents to really figure out, what do you believe about sex? Because to figure out, okay, what do I think the intentions are? What are their boundaries? Obviously every family's going to have different boundaries. And some families, the boundary is just consent. But like whatever it is, so there are boundaries somewhere, whether that's only for marriage or only for adults or only for consent, whatever it is. So it's like, be mindful of your boundaries and realize that every family's going to have different boundaries. And so we kind of have this idea of like, how can something be good but need boundaries? So kind of like this beauty and boundaries concept. And it really just kind of helps you see that like, this is good in its right boundaries.
Right, in its right size.
In its right
So it's
setting.
ice cream.
Exactly. So it's like, this is not a bad thing. And so kind of as parents are kind of train your brain to think that way and not like, it's bad, don't do it, this is awful. But like, hey, this is a good thing, but these are the boundaries in which it's best for your good, And again, those boundaries are going to be different for every family. And so I think as parents are kind of it takes away some of the shame of the conversation. And then we always say like, sooner is better than later. These conversations are so much easier as a parent when you can talk kind of medical and matter-of-factly, or what was our word? Medically.
Metafactly.
Talking like that when your kids are young is so much easier, and it gives you such confidence as a parent. If you do that for the first 10 years, by the time you really enter into these fun conversations about body changes,
right.
And they are more curious about the opposite sex and feelings and all those things. Like you have a 10-year platform of like, oh, I can do this.
Right.
I can talk about this. And your child already knows like, I know my dad will answer my questions.
Right.
I know I can talk to him about these things.
It's a safe space.
It's a safe place. And so you're creating this pattern of trust and communication. And so sooner is better than later, but later is better than never. And so if you are a parent out there who's listening who has older kids and think, well, shoot, I screwed this up.
Missed it.
You
right.
haven't. Move towards them. Hey, I'm so sorry. I feel like I should have done a better job on this topic, but it's not too late. And so for the next 2 weeks on the way to basketball practice, you're going to sit in the back seat and I'm going to sit in the front seat, and I'm just going to tell you a few things that I really want you to hear from me. You're going to have to be a bit more proactive about it. It's not going to be as organic as like cutting an apple and saying, look at these seeds. And,
right.
But I would, don't quit. Don't give up on it.
So we're coming up against our out, but I do want to wrap it up by asking you this. Is there a question or a thing that you wish parents were asking you more or more proactively perhaps?
I think there's some dangers and risks around screens. Exposure to pornography is a hot topic for me. I think that parents are maybe not as aware of that, or maybe they're aware of it, but they don't realize they should be talking to their kids about it at a young age. So I would say, and again, like all things, you don't take this heavy emotional topic and bring it to your 3-year-old. You say it in an age-appropriate way. Oh, sweetheart, mommy's going to type in the passcode to this iPad because we got to be really careful around screens. That's it.
Well, and to your point, Jacob, I remember, he was playing some very juvenile game, and like a commercial came, like an ad for, and it was a very suggestive like woman being like, "Do you want to see?" And I was like, "What is that?" Like, you're like watching Cocomelon.
Right.
It wasn't
totally.
Like, don't write me Cocomelon.
It was just
don't at me.
That kind of situation. Please come back. I feel like we have.
Yes, we have more. Yes, you are so talented.
Will you come
so
back
sweet,
and see us again?
Yes, this is so like talking to old friends.
So where can people go if they want more information right now?
Okay, if you can't get enough, you can follow us on Birds and Bees on Instagram. It looks better than it sounds because it's at birds__bees.
Perfect.
Awesome. And our website is birds-bees.com. So
okay.
Thank you, Megan.
I'm going to hold you to it. We're bringing you back.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you, guys.
That was awesome.
Okay, so terrifying. No.
no, I think that was really good.
And here's the thing, as she was talking about like, having the conversation about your kids and the seed, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, but my conversation has to be so different. Like, how am I ever going to broach that topic?
Which seed, Dad?
Right. And then we have plenty of seed. We do not have plenty of egg. Like, how does that all? But then I thought to myself, oh, wait a second. We are doing that. We are telling them the story of how
your kids know more probably than most because of the situation.
Probably.
And I think sometimes Brighton too, because we did IVF with Gemma, and because we
and
had
she experienced all of that.
She experienced losses before she like sort of fortunately or unfortunately was there for it. So it just sort of kind of like what Megan was saying. It's like that came up in our family. We probably wouldn't have brought it up if it hadn't come up.
Well, and I think the takeaway there for parents is that if you're afraid that you haven't done anything, you probably have broached this topic before with your kids and you just didn't realize it because surprised, it actually was pretty natural.
Maybe we are good parents.
Maybe we are good parents.
Come to find out.
I mean, I don't feed my kids organic fruit snacks, but whatever.
I feel like that wasn't a requirement. I feel like that has nothing to do with it. We're good.
Okay, the only requirement that we have is listen, please press subscribe and like, and come see us again every Tuesday morning when we release a new episode. And as always, I mean, today's episode was absolutely a result of you saying, we want to know more about this, so please continue to let us know so we can bring you the things that you love too. And if you do nothing else today, go find yourself a friend you don't need to clean the house for. We'll see you soon.